I've lived in New Jersey my entire life, and I know lots of interesting people. Artists, musicians, actors, business owners, and politicians. So my goal is to introduce some of the most interesting people who have ties to New Jersey. Either they live here, they work here, they went to school here, whatever tie I can think of. Many of these people are not well known even in New Jersey. But I'm going to change that because I'm Lucille Losapio, and this is Not So Famous in New Jersey. Who doesn't know who Tim McLoone is? Come on, people. Everyone knows who Tim McLoone is. At least it seems that way. He started as a runner, became a musician, and now he's a restaurant entrepreneur. But I know Tim a little better than most. In fact, I've known him longer than I've known my husband. But that's another story. Listen to our conversation, which took place last year. I am here with Tim McLoone, the famous Tim McLoone.
You make that sound so special.
It is so special. How long have we known each other?
I'm afraid to find out. I would think 40-something.
Oh, more than that.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think since the late 1970s.
Yeah, holy crap.
We're going to talk about that. But let me start by saying you're a restaurateur, a runner, a coach, you're a philanthropist and a club owner, and you're a musician and a band leader. So what do you do in your spare time?
I have 4 kids.
Yeah, but they're not little anymore.
They count.
Right?
Yeah, they're not. The youngest is 23.
Oh, that's not even a kid anymore.
Yeah. She's still living at home. It's great, though.
Yeah.
For all the parents out there that are irritated at their kids or can't wait for them to leave or whatever they say, no, this is the best. There's nothing better than when all 4 of them are in the house at the same time.
I mean, I grew up with 6 kids.
Really?
Yeah, there were 6 of us. And more often than not, we had somebody else living in the house with us.
Wow. Well, yeah.
Like a friend, relative.
Well, I hate to one-up you, but my wife is 10th of 11.
Ooh.
So there's always people in our house. And for me, I grew up really as an only child. I had an older brother, but he was almost 5 years older than I was. My dad was in Guam in the South Pacific during World War II. When he left, my mother was pregnant with my brother, and he came back 2.5 years later.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy? And like a lot of veterans, he never talks about it.
Yeah.
Or never talked about it. But for me, and my brother, unfortunately, was profoundly ill as a child. He had polio. We both did, but I just got sick, and that was the end of it for me. He got paralyzed from the neck down and had to grow out of that, and then subsequent surgeries and all that. So I spent a lot of time alone, which I thought actually kind of fueled my imagination when I think back on it now. And the fact that my father worked at a veterans hospital, he was in charge of recreation and entertainment for the returning soldiers from World War II first, and then from Korea. So I grew up around a lot of profoundly disabled amputees. It was an interesting incubator for how I turned out. My biggest fear as a child was being bored. Right before I came up here, I read an article about someone who was saying that their child doesn't want to do anything except be on media and just sit on the couch and do that. And they mentioned boredom. I would have never moved off a couch had there been what's available now.
And, you know, when I was growing up, like we had, like I said, 6 kids. If you wanted to play a game, there was always 1 or 2 people there. Like Scrabble, Monopoly, Clue, whatever. There was always somebody to play a game with.
I don't mean to have people feel badly for me, but I had to learn how to play alone. I did, because we also lived on the grounds of that hospital, so there were no other children.
Other kids, yeah.
And anybody that I played with had to be imported in, had to be driven there, and it was a different era. Both my parents worked.
What did you do to keep yourself occupied?
I had a lot of imaginary games, and I learned how to play board games by myself. But my primary thing was probably building blocks. That I loved Lincoln Logs and Plasticville, where these little towns,
fake, Lego type thing.
Yeah, all the toys in Toy Story were what I played with as a little kid. Well, I remember I invented a racetrack game, and I just drew it on paper with all the lanes, and then each of them had a square, and then I would put the number on little pieces of paper and put them in a hat, and I'd pick it out, and it would be 3. Okay, so that horse could go 3 steps. I mean, it was crazy stuff.
But I think that's the kind of thing that if more kids had to develop their creativity, because now they don't have to. They just go on their phone and play a game or...
Well, somewhere in there, music crept in, because I believe I was either 7 or 8 when I started talking about playing piano. Now, there was nobody in our family that played piano. I don't know where it came from.
Well, it's something you can do by yourself.
Yeah. So my parents, they rented a piano from Bamberger's. It was $5 a month. So I took lessons from Mr. Charles Kingsford when I was 8 till I was 9 and a half or so, and I quit. And meanwhile, they had bought the piano.
Oh, God.
So it served as a reminder. But it crept back in. When I got to about 11 or 12 years old, I have to admit, it was a way to be popular.
I was going to say, because around that age, kids are starting to form bands.
Yeah, and I was never in a band in middle school or high school or college.
You weren't
I never
good
did.
enough? No.
I was. I think that was absolutely true. You know what I learned how to do? I learned how to play advertising songs. Winston tastes good like a cigarette, and I could play them on the piano.
Yeah.
And they were all little jingles, and I learned all those things, and my friends loved it when I did that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Big
But
party games.
I had no thought whatsoever about keeping playing. I can remember that same piano was in our house as we moved a whole bunch of times. My dad lost his job one time and we moved, but the piano followed us wherever we went. And when my parents would be out and I'd be home alone, I would turn all the lights out in the house. I almost was, I think I literally was pretending I was Ray Charles.
Yeah.
And that I was blind. And I would sit in the dark and teach myself how to play piano, to actually play it. And my left hand and my right hand, I was playing exactly the same thing in both hands because I didn't know how to separate them.
Right.
And then all of a sudden one time I was trying to learn how to play Boogie Woogie. Dun, 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 and I did it. And I didn't have anybody to tell. Eventually I dragged my father. I can remember dragging my father down and says, Dad, you got to listen to this. You know, boom.
Was he impressed?
He was. My dad, he always wanted to be in show business. It just never worked out for him. But because he could sing and my mom could sing, but they had no access to anything like that.
Now, people always think of you either as, they think you're restaurants or Holiday Express. But when I think of you, I always think of the Damn Sight Dinner Theater. Because I was an actor.
I was the best.
And you were the piano player.
Yeah.
And, after every show, we'd go downstairs and you'd be playing the piano and we'd all be eating and acting crazy.
That was one of those fill-in gigs. Peter DeLamos, who owned it, was always good to me. When I was out of work or whatever was going on, if I had a crisis, Peter, I need a place to play. And so we put a piano down there on the bottom floor.
Right.
And I was behind the bar.
Right. And that was the place to be at night.
It was really unsettling at first trying to do it. That wasn't how, when we started, I just had a piano down there. And then he decided it would be really cool if I was behind the bar. And I'm like, oh, don't make me do that. And he built a platform so that I wasn't below everybody.
Right.
Because the bartenders are standing and I'm sitting.
Right.
So he built me up like, a foot or whatever. And it ended up, once I relaxed into it, it was the most damn fun you could have. And of course, as they referred to all of you, the play people would come downstairs at like 10:30 or whatever.
We would get free burgers.
Oh, really?
That was like a benefit because we only got paid $5 a night.
Yeah.
I mean, literally $5 a night.
And I think at that you were probably a little overpaid. Yeah. I wouldn't have done more than like $350.
We were good.
You were good. It was a funny time to meet you and Billy and Jane and all those terrific actors.
And the thing for all the actors, like even if you weren't in a show, you knew that every Friday and Saturday night there would be people from the show there.
Yeah.
So like, I feel like going out. I'll just go to the Damn Site and hang out there. There was always going to be people that you knew.
Well, Billy was always asking me to play Groucho Marx songs. So I learned things like Lydia the Tattooed Lady and all this stuff. It was actually good for me that you were all there because it was challenging. I'm among artists.
Yeah.
When you're among artists, you're going to lift your game up a little bit, I'm not sure how much I was lifting it after my fourth apricot brandy, but I stopped lifting around 11:45, I think. But it was great. And like I said, I never played in a band. Running track and cross country and all that dominated my life. My whole life since I was 13 years old was when I would wake up, I would be asking myself, what's happening in running today? Even when I was in high school.
Really?
Like, what's today's workout? And then when I became older, it was like, what am I doing about running today?
So
even if I didn't do it.
running was your focus then?
It was totally. And I think the reason was it was the first thing I was really good at. And maybe, and arguably the only thing I was really good at.
And you didn't have to depend on anybody else.
Yeah.
And I've been in lots of jobs where they go, well, we want you to like work as a team and be judged as a team. No, I want to be judged as me.
Yeah.
Let them be a team. I'll do it by myself and I'll get judged the same way.
Well, that's track, and that's the way it works. I coach now at our local high school. I always tell them it's an individual sport disguised as a team sport. When I was a kid in grammar school, I didn't make any teams. I loved baseball. And I couldn't play. And it just never worked. I didn't make any teams. And then I get to high school, and I don't know what made me go out for cross country. The coach, but he totally changed my life. Bill Persichetti, he was a world record holder for Fordham University. Very charismatic. He always said that he was, an angry Italian, a passionate Italian, but I loved him. I didn't know that I had the cardiovascular system inside of this overweight body. I was a pudgy kid. My nickname in grammar school was Tank. Tank. What a horrible nickname. And it wasn't in a friendly way.
Yeah, no.
You know, and when my kids see pictures of me in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they are shocked. As a freshman, I couldn't run in the beginning because I was so heavy. In that 1 year, I grew probably 3 or 4 inches and dropped 20 pounds. And all of a sudden, I was 6 feet tall, 140, instead of being 5'8", 175. And it was in me. You know, I get no credit for that. Yeah. I tell the kids that I coach, some of them all the time, when they come right out and they can do that sport, I said, okay, this is what you were born with. You get no credit for this. What happens after this is what matters. The thing about people that are successful, in my life, I've had the opportunity, either through running or music or whatever, to be involved with a lot of really successful people. For 9 years, I worked for the New Jersey Nets, who are now the Brooklyn Nets in the NBA. And I announced their games, but I was also in charge of something called game operations. But I got to know the players. And you realized after doing this that there were plenty of talented players out there who never get there because they're not organized. You always get the people, whether it's in any of the arts and maybe in life in general, who have the basic goods, but they don't have that other gene which makes them seek it out and do all the things you need to do to keep yourself organized.
It's almost a curse to be that talented.
Yeah. Well,
because,
some people who are the uber talented people can also make their way through because others will enable them.
Yeah.
And even though that person is a personal train wreck, they will do everything they can to make them get through.
Yeah.
You know, Darlene Love, she always talked about how when she was on the Chitlin circuit, when she was first starting out, she went home at night. But this was a lifelong self-discipline of taking care of herself physically. That was her mantra, is take care of myself. All the great people I've gotten to meet and in some cases work with almost too exclusively had the ethic. There was a young guy who was a guest speaker at an award ceremony. He's now one of the best smilers in the United States. And he talked about the battle between being well-rounded, or as he said that day, trying to stay pointy. He said, well-rounded is the enemy. In my life, personally, I've actually felt as I got older that my self-destruct in a way was doing too many things. And the saying is, jack of all trades, master of none. I've always felt that phrase was invented for me.
But it worked for you. You managed to open up I won't call it a chain of restaurants, but multiple restaurants. Because, you know, chain makes it sound like it's Fridays.
Yeah.
But you have multiple
And they
restaurants.
just went out of business. Better
did
we
they?
don't. Yeah.
Ooh. But, you know, the difference is, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have your employees rotate between your restaurants. Is that correct?
Well, we do a lot of that. The whole package in everything, and that includes music too, is getting with people who share your ethic and match up with you.
Yeah.
I said 100 times, I played most of my life with musicians who were better than I am. I surrounded myself with them. And I didn't do it consciously. I just tried to get the best musicians I could.
It's just that everybody was better than you.
Yeah. It was a little depressing. I guess what I was doing was challenging myself, but I don't know. I don't think that was it. I think I was just trying to put out the best music I could. And I was trailing behind, and particularly when I went through that whole thing with your husband, Gary, of trying to be kind of a jazz fusion guy. I was not good on that kind of piano. I know
You have to know what your
my
strengths
ability
are.
to play is I'm almost like a rhythm guitar player on the piano. Part of it's that I'm left-handed. My right hand doesn't work very well in terms of soloing and articulating and all that. I know what sounds good, and I try to get there. And you know what changed me? I wasn't playing music enough. I only played music to learn something. I need a song. Okay, I'm going to go to the piano. I'm going to play it. But I never just walked over and played piano.
Yeah, I'm gonna practice for an hour.
As opposed to Bruce Springsteen and all of his followers, Bob Bandiera, the rest of them, who would sit on a bed at night in their bedroom playing chords to every song ever written. I wasn't doing that. I was out running, I guess. So Holiday Express comes along.
I was just going to bring Holiday Express up.
And it changed me. And for people that don't know Holiday Express, we are an all-volunteer organization. And what we do is take the best holiday parties we possibly can in November and December to places who basically, if we're not there, they get little or no attention. Places like long-term residential psychiatric facilities, AIDS hospices, soup kitchens, homeless shelters. And what ended up happening was that first year we did 10 events back in 1993. And then we did 17, and then we did 24. And now I don't remember the numbers. But now we do 100 events in about 50 days.
Wow.
We start in the very beginning of November, and then we go to Christmas Eve. I don't do all of them, obviously, but I played 52 of them this year. I do count, just out of curiosity. And if you add in my own band, so maybe 65 times in 2 months, I'm playing music. I got so much better. I can remember years ago, maybe a dozen years ago, we were playing at the Rum Runner, and we took a break, and this person said to me, your piano playing really sounded good tonight. And normally I would say, well, blah, 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 deflect it. I was like, you know what? You're right. Something happened. I'm about to turn 76. I play piano better now than I ever have in my life. I only played for money, the truth be known, to try and keep myself solvent. I was lazy about rehearsing because I wanted to be out on a run or whatever else I was doing in my life. I just try to fit everything in.
I think when you're doing something to make money, it's a whole different thing.
Right.
Acting for me, it was never about making money.
Good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing murder mysteries for like the last 25 years or something. And every time we're done and I get a check, I'm like, oh, I forgot I was getting paid. So I'm doing it because I love doing it.
I don't pay myself when I play. I just give it to the band. But that's a change. I mean, because back in the day, that's what I was doing. That's how I was trying to support myself.
Right.
I can remember I'd keep this little notebook, a tiny notebook, and I'd write down the gig and how much I made. $40 and $8 in tips. 1 year, and I probably played 27 out of those 31 days in the month of December. Yeah, and people that complain to me, people in my employ at the restaurants who they don't like working on weekends, I'm like, you are talking to the wrong person. I spent all my life, I would play on Christmas Eve, Christmas night.
Obviously, New Year's Eve.
Yeah. Max Weinberg from Bruce's band said to me one time there was really only 3 types of musicians. And I said, what are they? He goes, well, the ones that work on New Year's Eve, the ones that don't have to work on New Year's Eve, and the ones who can't find work on New Year's Eve. That always stuck. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. But when you're singing for your supper, it's a different ethic. You got to be good. And again, you have to be organized. Over all these years, we have a lot of live music in our restaurants. And, I never forget where I came from. So I love, and matter of fact, you should tell Gary to call me.
When we're done, I'll tell him to come down. He's up in his studio upstairs.
I don't necessarily want to see him.
Hey, if I got to see him, I got to see him.
The difference between having to play and wanting to play. And if you have both, I think that's where the success is. Bruce Springsteen needs to play. He needs it. And
he doesn't need it for the money. He needs it because he needs it. Speaking of money, it's amazing. Musicians make the same amount now that they may have made back in the 60s or 70s. $100 a gig.
Yeah. We struggle with that at the restaurants because the last thing I want to do is underpay people. But it did hit the wall. Part of it was DJs. There's a generation of kids right now who are between the ages of 10 and 25 who have very rarely heard live music.
Yeah.
Unless it was their friends, which maybe was the way it always was. Yeah. But the lack of value put on live music.
But I think that's changing now. I mean, the same thing like records. Now, the younger generation, the youngest generations want to listen to records.
Yeah, they want vinyl.
Yeah.
But the pay. So when I was playing, I started out at probably $40 a night in the 70s. And then I got popular-ish, and I was making $100 and tips. And that was pretty good. And then I found myself 30 years later paying some musicians $100.
Yeah.
Crazy. And the thing that we as musicians didn't understand, and maybe we don't want to understand, is that there is a metric about what you cost and what you bring in. And the problem we have always had, now we don't do that anymore. I don't know. I think everybody makes a minimum of $200 or something like that. And they do make tips. And tipping musicians, I think, is better now than it used to be.
Yeah.
I have so many people that want to play and are good. Nobody comes to see them. If you don't provide incremental business, then you better be damn good. That it's just, you're so good it doesn't matter. But that never happens, because if you're so good it doesn't matter.
You're not playing in a local bar.
Yeah, people are going to come see it too. It's hard because I try to take the musicians thing on this, but if we look at the end of the year, okay, we spent $100,000 this year on live music. How'd that work out? Down in Asbury Park, we do live music 3 nights a week in the Robinson Ale House, and the Supper Club is very busy now. But we went through a lot of pains, particularly up in the Supper Club, of what do we charge the customer to get in there? We were charging like $5, $10 cover charges, and the bands make money up there, but they have to sell tickets. It's really obvious, as opposed to downstairs where we just pay and there's no cover charge. So that puts the limit on how much they're going to make, just because there's nothing to defray it. For us, it's just a flat out expense. I don't know. Now I'm feeling guilty. I'm going to go raise everybody up.
Well, since we're talking about pay, how do you feel about a minimum wage for restaurant workers?
I honestly have a lot of guilt about not being smart enough or cognizant enough enough to realize that the restaurant industry in general was born on the backs of people that can't make a living. That, somebody was washing dishes and making $6 an hour, $7, $8 an hour at the old Rum Runner. And then I'd go down to the 7-Eleven and I'd see the same person there folding the newspapers for Sunday, right? Trying to hold it together. It was almost like an acceptable thing. The back of house people who were the prep cooks and the dishwashers and whatever were not making a living wage. I'd never even heard of the term living wage. And then I started doing the metrics and I realized, no, I'm doing the wrong thing here. Governor Murphy, for whatever else people's problems are, at least he was championing that. And we were the first restaurant in New Jersey to go to $15 an hour. And then we raised it to $16. Mm-hmm. So anybody that walks into our place that may not speak English and has no particular restaurant skill, and they're just going to be put into what we call the dish tank, they're going to make $16 an hour. Well, hell, if you can even get 30 hours at that a week, you're going to make 25, but most of them will make 30-something to $40,000. And they don't have to be particularly skilled. And I feel a hell of a lot better about that. The interesting part was that we lost 3 percentage points in our wages going up like that. But business improved enough that we really didn't feel it too terribly.
Kind of leveled it out.
In our industry, if you make 12% of what you take in, you are extremely successful. Most restaurants will settle for 10. You can survive at 8. And here we lost 6. We lost 3 in the costs and we lost 3 in labor. Right. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? It just worked out.
Yeah. When I was in advertising, I used to work at the Point radio station. New restaurant would open, and I'd go in to talk with them. And most people that open a restaurant have no idea about the restaurant business.
Oh, me too. I got all my knowledge sitting behind a piano. Yeah. Watching. I'm worried about radio.
Oh, yeah.
Because, all new cars that are being made, there's no AM radio.
I know. When I was in radio, everybody that opened a new business was like, I've got to be in the newspaper. And even then, not that many people read the newspaper. If you're trying to reach the 65 plus,
right,
they are. But like now, nobody.
I read the paper this morning. I'm proving your point.
Yeah.
When you open the paper, the content is so old. You do know, I coach high school kids, right? We did a little poll the other day. Not one of them has ever read a newspaper. Not one of them has ever listened to radio unless they were in their parents' car and forced to, but they would not listen to music or anything else by seeking it out that way.
Right.
And so that means all these radio stations are going to go away. And as was pointed out, particularly with AM radio, well, if there is a nuclear holocaust someday, you're going to need AM radio. During Sandy, we went 15 days without power. And we learned a couple of things. Fortunately, we had a
generator.
The generator went at the 4-hour mark. It was underwater because I'm a genius. But we had a gas-fired fireplace in our bedroom. So the 4 kids and the 2 of us, that's where we were for 15 days. So we learned that there was a lot of nuance to Yahtzee that I didn't realize existed. But I had an AM radio in there. And that's what we listened to. We listened to, news and trying to find out what the hell's going on in the world and all the rest of it.
I want to change the subject a little bit because I understand that you are actually almost a professional mechanic.
Totally.
Wait, can that be it? No, it's not it. There's plenty more of my conversation with Tim McLoone, but I couldn't fit it all in this 20 minutes. So stay tuned. The next episode, we will go into lots of other stuff, things that you will not believe. Where else can you hear scintillating conversations with interesting people with ties to New Jersey, except for here? You can't, and that's why you should subscribe and listen to every episode. I'm Lucille Osapio, and this is Not So Famous in New Jersey.